DangerDolan. It's been 6 years since the release of Burning Crusade, and thanks to the Cataclysm revamp, the content from BC is now the oldest in the game. So how does Outland, the Azure Mist Isles, and Quel'The Last hold up after all this time? Are the quests and dungeons so outdated that they need an overhaul, or are you perfectly happy blazing through with heirlooms, entirely ignoring Netherstorm and Shadowmoon Valley, those poor neglected zones? Well, the only reason Outland would make a comeback would be for a Burning Legion themed expansion, which we all know is inevitable. And so with that in mind, let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of rebuilding that Burning Crusade leveling experience. So first up you have story. Every quest and piece of lore in Outland is now irrelevant. Illidan is dead, the Black Temple has been redeemed. Well, more or less. Kal'thas, Lady Varsh, Magtheridon and Kil'jaeden have all been handled, yet Outland is still set in the past, just like Northrend. To go from 1 to 60 Deathwing, to Illidan is alive, to the Lich King must be stopped, to Deathwing is back, to let's go to Pandaria, is a bit confusing for every new player. But if we have learned anything from the Cataclysm revamp, it's that players don't care about low level content. Sure, we did back in vanilla, but now all we want is endgame. Though perhaps it's possible to slice away pieces of Outland and turn them into scenarios to update their story, like the scenarios used to showcase phase transitions in the Isle of Thunder. So while this would solve the issue of narrative inconsistency, it doesn't really change the 60 to 70 questing zones. But I must ask, is your BC leveling experience even necessary anymore? In previous discussions, I've thrown around the idea of an alternative leveling experience, as in you retain the content from BC and Wrath, but offer a 60 to 80 substitute. So let's say you fall asleep at 60, quest through somewhere like the Emerald Dream for 20 levels, wake up and continue through Azeroth like before. Or maybe something akin to the Path of the Titans, a system in Cataclysm that never made it past beta, in which you could still progress your character at max level. You present a revamped, scalable Outland, completable at either max or low level, since the main problem with Cataclysm's revamp was that max level players barely saw the new content, but with this system, you can do the quests while leveling, or at level cap in a kind of hard mode variety, like the difference between normal and heroic scenarios. At least then new players can see what Outland has to offer, and then for subsequent playthroughs they'll be able to experience something new if they so choose. I don't feel the quests and dungeons in BC are all that outdated. In fact, it's the last bastion of open-ended, non-linear questing. What I mean by that is, if you wanted to skip, say, Thrallmar and head straight for Falcon Watch to pick up some quests, you can do that at any time. But then look at Cataclysm leveling zones. The quest board takes you to one specific place, and then you go from one spot to the next designated spot in a linear fashion. Or look at the Worgen starting zone. That's linear as fuck. You must progress through Gilneas completing the exact quests you're supposed to, or half the zone doesn't spawn properly. And that's led some players to try and unsuccessfully escape the zone, myself included. Let me tell you, it's not fun being trapped in a zone with no way to delete the character because of heirlooms and a lack of mailbox, and no way off Mr. Greymane's wild ride. So while it was necessary for Cata to update all the old zones, it may be too much work to redo all of Outland content for such a limited scope of the game, if it is indeed only built as a 10 level quest hub. For a Legion expansion, they're better off introducing Argus, the Eredar homeworld, or new planets in the Twisting Nether. Back when Draenor was getting ripped to shreds, a lot of Alliance and Horde members jumped into random nether shoots to avoid getting killed, which means if an expansion is based on a new world, you can safely bet we'll find races and characters from Azeroth like Alleria and Terralion. And since Outland brought with it otherworldly art assets, it won't be nearly as time consuming to create new zones in the same style, which means more content. If Blizzard came to me and offered a new linear up-to-date questing experience in the same old Outland, or a new world in the same art style and a new storyline, I'll take the new world any day. So do I think Outland should be revamped? No, absolutely not. In terms of quests, they hold up fine. You can grind up to Northrend with dungeon queues in a matter of hours. Story-wise, we need a solution like scenarios phasing at max level, or expand the Burning Crusade story into another world and continue it there. As for the Azure Mist Isles and Quel'The Last, apart from the lack of flying, I don't see why they need to be changed, and even then, What's the point of reworking terrain and art to accommodate flying, which we all know ruins world immersion in PvP? Back in the Cataclysm Alpha, they considered adding the ability to fly in the Ghostlands, since zul'aman was a max level raid back in patch 2.3. But because there were so many invisible walls stopping you from getting, well, anywhere, along with the low texture trees not meant to be viewed from high up, it was scrapped. Honestly, I'm looking at the situation from all angles and I can't justify Blizzard putting in the man hours to overhaul locations that don't need overhauling. Maybe if they hired a small team to work on it, while the major team adds new content like usual. But look, it comes down to this simple fact. I never want to see a patch 4.1 Rise of the Zandalari again. If revamped old content is the major focus of a patch or expansion, not as a supplemental inclusion, then it's gonna make me bleed internally. And for those that don't know, back in BlizzCon 2010, they talked about this very subject. Here's a clip.
We absolutely will go back and affect Outland to make it more cohesive, to make it make sense.
You know what? The fact is, Outland and Lich King are going to be a little broken for a while. It's something we thought a lot about when we were planning Cataclysm. We have every intention of not letting this world we care a lot about be broken for years and years, but we're still trying to figure out how we're going to... It's like, do you guys want another really thrilling expansion, or do you want us to fix Outland? Because in terms of like quest design, it's kind of the same amount of work. You know, and we're trying to bang these expansion sets out, you know, before you all have, you know, grandchildren and stuff.
So quest-wise, they're fine with both Outland and Northrend, but they have every intention to fix the story for new players. It's just a case of if and how. And now we turn to some viewer comments, starting with Septree. Oh hell no, if they touch a single fell boar or demon, I'll personally go to Blizzard and slap them upside the head with my chunk of boar meat. In all seriousness though, it is a reminder and pleasant memory of older WoW. Plus most people just grind their dungeons. A lot of the comments I received for this video revolved around nostalgia and how, using Cataclysm as a prime example, severing an emotional attachment to a certain thing, even if it is shitty and needs reworking, that's never a good idea. At least not unless you offer it somewhere else, like on a Burning Crusade only server. I personally enjoyed all the Cataclysm changes, but I can also understand why people would have a problem with the revamp, along with any hesitation one might have for Outland adjustments. But what we have to appreciate is that WoW is not like other games. It's a progressive story in a persistent world, an emulation of real life. In Warcraft 3, you can replay the game and story at any time from any chapter. But WoW is so massive and sandbox that to retain 9 years worth of story for new players just isn't feasible. The best you can do is retell the story in a concise manner, like YouTube lore videos, or characters like Sylvanas explaining the events from Vanilla to Wrath, or scenarios catching up on what you've missed. This is the same in life. You can't turn back time and experience World War I. All you can do is hear about what happened and maybe watch a movie or play a game. See, I'm nostalgic for when the N64 was released, playing Mario Kart, watching cartoons, but at the end of the day, they're just memories. They should be cherished, but it's not healthy to hang on to them too tightly. And I feel the same thing is happening here. My only problem with revamping Outland is that it would take too much manpower from current endgame content, not that it would tarnish my memories. If there's a way to let players in-game get a brief summary of the BC story, and there's a way to revamp Outland without sacrificing current content, then I say revamp Outland. If you're really desperate to experience the entire BC story and all its minutiae, you have the option to play on private servers. I've played on the Emerald Dream server, which rebuilds vanilla WoW exactly as it was 6 years ago, and let me tell you, I couldn't distinguish it from a genuine Blizzard server. There were players running around, everything was scripted, it's a nostalgia overload. But I didn't play past the starting zone even though I was really enjoying it, and that's because I don't want to live in the past. Vanilla had its time, just like the Burning Crusade. I cherish the experience, but if the old content drags down the game as it is, though I'll admit Outland holds up damn well to this day, then it's time to move on. And now next comment from Adam Mouse. Outland should probably be redone or at least add some additional content along with the coming of the Burning Legion. There is some interesting lore going on there with some leftover black dragons, the unshackled demons that Illidan used to control, and the ethereals. I believe they could make Outlands to be a place where we search for answers in order to put a halt into the unstoppable Burning Legion destroying Azeroth, or even revive Illidan himself, assuming he is even dead. Alright, so Illidan, is he coming back? Well, if the BlizzCon 2011 Q&A panel is anything to go by, I'd say it's more or less confirmed. It's just a matter of when and how. It goes without saying that as a demon hunter, he'd be involved in the Legion/Argus storyline, but then he does have ties to Queen Azshara and the city of Nazjatar. In the recent novel Wolfheart by Richard Knack, Maiev Shadowsong lost her shit in the aftermath of Illidan's death, and is currently AWOL after getting a bunch of her watchers killed, vowing to restore the Night Elves to greatness, which sounds somewhat reminiscent of Queen Azshara's quest for the Legion's power. It's possible Maiev will play a role in Illidan's resurrection, but in what capacity I can't even speculate. If Illidan is to come back to life, it's a problem with one very real solution, similar to what happened with Kel'Thuzad. If you recall, in the Warcraft 3 campaign, the only way to revive KT was by dunking his skeleton in the Sun Well, which is a fountain of energy created by a vial from the original Well of Eternity. During the War of the Ancients, Illidan collected 7 of these vials. 3 he poured to create the well on Mount Hyjal, 1 to make the Sun Well, 2 are in the hands of Soridormi, who is second in command of the Bronze Dragonflight, and the final vial is missing. It's possible that Illidan still had the final vial in his possession at the time of death, and that by using it alongside necromancy, he could be revived just as KT was. This would of course make him an undead skeleton, as surely his corpse would have decomposed by now. You can approach this revival in a number of ways, but this is the only one with any form of precedence. If you abduct him from the caverns of time, it'll mess up the timeline and break the universe. And I'm not a fan of that. And now we have a comment from Superfry. If I recall correctly, you don't really spend enough time in Outland now to warrant an extreme makeover to the whole experience, reduced XP per level, etc. So I don't think Blizzard should take away precious development time from other shiz to enhance it. They could make everything up to say Kata be mandatory and included in the WoW box download. That'd free them up to add bits and boobs to anything. Anywhere that isn't defined as an expansion, because every player is expected to have it. So we've talked about alternate quest zones and how it's a bad idea to revamp low level content, but there's one last idea I'd like to discuss, and that's the concept of scalable zones. Not scalable in the sense that each mob in the area gains more health if you're level capped, but the idea of capped players being able to reduce their level to experience content at its intended difficulty, just like the mentoring system in Rift. So a level 75 player can reduce his level to 25 and do Stone Talon Mountains instead of a zone in Northrend, but it takes just as long for your experience bar to go up as if you were still level 75. That way you build a new Outland or new planet for an endgame questing experience, which you can also scale down to level 64. Of course, it may be too late in WoW's life cycle to introduce such a drastic and sweeping change, but since the alternative is the impossibility of an Outland revamp without wasting development resources, it's a question of long term, would this change be worth it? If scalable raids are possible, is there a chance we could have level and zone scaling too? With level scaling comes a new era of level 60, 70, 80 and 85 raid guilds, since it's now easy to get your raid team to scale down for something like Black Temple. But there are so many complications with this theoretical implementation that personally, as much as I like the idea on paper, I'm not convinced it'll work. Not only do you have to decide what happens to players' hotbars if half their abilities vanish when they adjust their level, but do you make all the gear scalable too? If players can quest in a new zone at low level, will they still be interested in doing it at level cap? How do people progress in a questing zone if they are capped? Do you implement a new Path of the Titans? There's so many questions and issues that need to be resolved simply to let players experience the cool new quest zone without rolling an alt. Too many, I say. So should Outland be revamped? No. Tell the BC story in another way, but leave it as it is. Focus on new and exciting content. At the very least, reuse the BC Wrath and Kata dungeon raid environments and encounters, but leave Draenor alone. It's time to move forward, not look back. So that's it for this discussion. As for a topic for next week, we have, will Blizzard ever develop a Warcraft 4 RTS? So has it been long enough since Warcraft 3? Do you think we need to advance the story? Do you just want to play another RTS in the Warcraft vein? So let's get some creative ideas flowing, think outside the box. What do you want to see in Warcraft 4 RTS? Maybe some new races, new villains? Let me know in the comments and I'll discuss them next time. So that's it. Have a good one.